Makai Bernard is officially back, and the Utes land a wide receiver transfer through the portal. All that and more on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire the qualified candidates more effectively by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your 2023 goals. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions may apply. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. On today's show, we're talking about Makai Bernard coming back. Also, the Utes landing Emery Simmons through the transfer portal, and some more fun stuff on Locked On Utes today. And in order to help me break all that down, it's friend of the show and the former host of this podcast, Bryan Brown. And Bryan, when we're talking about Makai, when you're talking about Makai coming back, I think going into this year, we all expect this to kind of be Makai's last year with the team in the 2022 season, and then it ends. And I think a lot of people thought he was going to end up going pro, but then he decides to go to the portal, goes on a couple of visits with some SEC schools. There were some late rumors tying him to Colorado even, but in the end, he comes back, and I think this is great for the Utes. You really saw the two-headed monster of him and Jaquindon Jackson really take off at the end of the season, and I think this is just another strong addition to a team that's looking to three-peat in terms of Pac-12 championships.
It is, and I think even with a crowded running back room, and you have a lot of great talent coming in there with, I'm forgetting John Randall. I want to say
Yep.
DeJohn Stanley, all the running back recruits that Utah landed in the cycle. What you really want with Makai Bernard is a guy who knows the offense, right?
Yes.
And a lot of what he brings to the table is not in terms of him being able to run the inside zone the way Utah wants to run it, as much as it is his versatility and what he can do for the roster. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? If you have a deficiency at one position, he can fill that, and I think one thing that we really didn't see a lot of from Makai is his ability to line up in the slot and make big plays. You saw it in the Rose Bowl in 2021 where Cam Rising hit him on that wheel route, and it was a beautiful pass, beautiful catch. It was a once in a lifetime kind of highlight for him,
Yes.
and he is capable of making those plays. The hard part about Makai is he has always been I don't want to say second best, but he's always been stuck in this role of like, well, Makai can do everything for us, so we'll just kind of put him into everything,
Yes.
as opposed to being a feature back. And I think going around to a couple other institutions, finding out that maybe that's how they view him as well. It was smart of Makai to think about everything, to come back through the portal. And Kyle Whittingham has mentioned before that once you're in the portal, you're done to him. It's almost like mafia style. I don't know that necessarily was the case with Makai, because I
Yeah.
think this is a kid that came to Utah when he was 17. He's been here for 4 years. He's had to deal with the Tavion Thomas drama playing out in front of him all along, and just he's always been, for lack of a better term, a good soldier. He's
Yes.
never complained, positive attitude, been an absolute joy to have. And so I think because of who he's been throughout the course of the program, Kyle Whittingham was understanding. Like, if you want to go look around and see what else is out there, I'm okay with that, because I
Yeah.
know who you are and I know what we can do for you. And
Mhm.
so you look at all that all encompassing, and it's I think the other part of it too is just Kyle Whittingham's adjusting,
Yes.
and
Oh,
he
yes.
said it as much in his article with Chris Camrani that
Mhm.
he wants to change, and you're probably not a who moved my cheese kind of guy, because I'm old and like I read that self-help stuff all the time. But Kyle is moving with the cheese here. He knows he can't always be a stalwart. Like, once you're in the portal, you're done. If you have a 4-year guy who goes in the portal and wants to look around, that's not a bad thing. If you're Utah, it means that you're developing guys the right way, and guys want to see what else is out there, because at the end of the day, the best part about it, Makai went and took a look in the SEC. He went to Colorado, where Trevor Riley's out there.
Mhm.
Who knows what other visits he had? I'm- I I'd heard some things about some other California schools where he was visiting as well. Definitely not in the northern half of the state, so don't even think about that. And he came back to Utah. So what better way to market your program to people than say, like, we had a guy who went through the portal and came back,
Mhm.
and then in this day and age, for guys who have been in a school for 4 years, there's a lot of factors that go into that. So it's a big win for Utah. I think it's a bigger win for Makai, especially a dude who was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list and
Yeah.
didn't really, have the kind of season that he wanted to with some injury stuff. But he's coming back again to a loaded room with a lot of opportunity for him to be a versatile piece. And hopefully with all this experience returning again for Andy Ludwig and the addition of Coach Alvis Whitted, they can find ways to really maximize all the talent they have there.
You mentioned too just some of the stuff Makai's gone through. I mean, obviously everyone on Utah lost a teammate, but he lost someone too who was sitting in the position room with him in Ty Jordan, and can't imagine that kind of the toll it took on him as well. So just been through a lot with his Utah football team. And look, Makai, yes, he had a down year last year, as you talked about, but still overall 533 rushing yards, scored 4 touchdowns on the ground too, and still really valuable as a receiver too, 314 yards through the air. And he's the guy, if Utah's in those situations at the end of the game where it's like 2 minute drill offense, Makai is going to be out there, and not just for his ability to get open on the outside, but also Utah's best pass protecting block. And I think Jaquindon Jackson is going to continue to pick up a lot of the fundamentals as a running back. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this in a second too. I do think Jaquindon will still be Utah's running back one next season. If you look at it, he really took off. The difference in carries is massive in terms of how many Makai brought versus how many Jaquindon got. And they were very close in terms of yards. In fact, I think Jaquindon was just shy of Makai. So I do expect Jaquindon to be running back one. I expect him to get the majority of the carries still, but this is still going to be a 1-2 punch. And we're going to see a lot of Makai Bernard out there. And if I had to guess on how they'll split that carry share, I think we'll see, I'll go 60% Jaquindon in terms of when he's given the ball to run, and then Makai gets the other 40 in terms of on the ground. But anytime it's third and long, we know Makai Bernard is going to be on the field.
And that's the key component, right? I think this is an offense that's looking for some guys to step up and really fill some roles. Even though you do have Brant Keithy coming back, even though you do have Cam Rising coming back, even though you do have 3 of 5 starters coming back on the offensive line. And listen, I can even throw in the caveat that, like, the fact that you're losing Paul Miley is more because of the fact that you have better guys underneath him.
Yeah.
So it's not really a huge loss with Paul. And
Mhm.
that's not a knock on Paul or his play. It's more just a commentary on his career and
Yep.
injury history and everything like that, which we're not allowed to talk about. But um, if you shoot me a DM on Twitter, maybe I'll tell you the truth of
We
everything.
spoke
And
very glowingly of Paul a few weeks ago
Paul's the
too.
best. Paul is the
Yes.
best, and it sucks to lose a guy like that, both from a
Mhm.
leadership perspective, but also from a talent perspective. And in terms of a guy who sets your tone, who has experience, who does a great job getting everybody where they need to go. But listen, this is a hard game. It comes with injuries. That alone should be a huge flag of why it's great to have Makai Bernard come back, because you are loaded in that running back room. You've got Chris Curry coming back. You've got Jalen Glover coming back. You've
Mhm.
got now Makai Bernard coming back, and you have all these freshmen coming in. Last year, that room was almost empty by the time Jaquindon Jackson carried over. Now, whatever Jaquindon decides to do, Utah's going to be in a great place, right?
Mhm.
Because he's gotten experience out there, and I don't think it's the worst idea to have your quarterback or your backup excuse me, your backup quarterback out there watching the guy who runs the show get reps in first person, right? You and I are both
Yes.
pseudo gamers. We know all about the first person RPG. It's good to see how it looks in front of you. So whatever Jaquindon
Mhm.
decides
Oh,
to
yes.
do in terms of his position and where he wants to play, now his ceiling at the running back position is the roof, as Michael Jordan would say. And I apologize to everybody who wants to be a Nike or a Jordan school that we can't actually you know be one of those. But the fact of the matter is that Utah's in a really good place because they have depth, they have variety, they have guys who understand and know this offense, and they have guys who are coming back for a reason. One, because I think they care about this program, they believe in the family atmosphere, and if ever you wanted to herald Kyle Whittingham for what he's done, that would be reason number one. Is he's built a culture and a community there where people genuinely feel loved. And that's important because this is a tough sport. It is a tough gig at the University of Utah. It is not easy to play football up there. I'm
Mhm.
telling people, it
Oh,
is
yeah.
not easy. And so when you have guys who really want to come back and do the hard thing, that's a big, big statement for this program.
1000%. It is great to have Makai coming back. It's going to be fun to see what him and Jaquindon can do next season. Brian, really quick, if it was your decision, would you switch to Nike or Jordan?
Oh, I'm the wrong person to ask that question because I've actually dealt with them on, like, the administrative level, and I hate dealing with
Oh,
Nike.
really?
Like, yeah, it's impossible to get stuff. It's impossible to get stuff on
Yeah.
time. I think Utah's really lucky because they get the best of the best with the Under Armour stuff. I always tell people all the time, like, if you swap the logos, everybody would love everything that Under
Yes.
Armour does, which is fine. Like, look, the swoosh is the best logo in the history of logos. The fact that Phil Knight paid $25 for that thing is the biggest case of
That's
highway robbery. Now
unbelievable.
he's taken care of the designer, so like I'm not trying to like critique Phil Knight on this or anything like that, but it's just there is this precedence now where you have to be a Nike or a Jordan school to have success, and I think Nike and Jordan don't really fit who Utah is,
No, I
and it's
totally
just
agree with that.
this is not a flashy program. This is not Coach Prime coming out with, Amazon series talking about how great he is and
We
sharing
coming.
whatever Bible verse, or like, can you picture I don't know if you've seen the Coach Prime series, but can you picture Kyle Whittingham doing that? Because I
No,
cannot.
gosh, no, no. They're polar
Yeah,
opposites.
and I think that there's a lot of continuity with Under Armour and everything like that. Now, do fans love Nike gear? Absolutely. Do I get it? 100%. Is it the same fabric that goes through Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour? Yep.
Yep.
Does Under Armour take really good care of Utah? Yep. Is that why Utah's
Very
still
good.
with Under Armour? 100%. So it's one of those things where it all depends on your perspective here, and I'm not gonna shortchange anybody or be angry or yell at anybody who wants to have a swoosh on their stuff. Like, but I could go put a swoosh on this, a no name product, and everybody like, oh, that's a really cool hoodie. Where'd you get that?
Swagged out, dog.
Yeah. So and like, listen, like I'm one of the biggest offenders of that is I'm wearing a Carhartt beanie right now,
Yeah.
right?
Watch the drip.
So yeah, it's one of those things where it's such a big part about culture now and,
Mhm.
and and everything like that. But I think what Utah's done is bigger than swooshes and bigger than NIL
Yeah.
and bigger than flashy photo things and everything like that. And
Mhm.
and for a guy, just to tie this all together, for a guy like Makai, who's been in the program for 4 years, who knows how much he's loved and appreciated. And I have to give a little bit of credit to the fans here. People have been exceptionally good about not being a-holes when these guys go in the portal, and I think that's a big reason
Yes.
why Makai felt comfortable coming
Really
back.
good point. Mhm.
So for every Utah fan out there was who sent a tweet, who posted a message, said, "We love you, appreciate you, everything you've done, good luck on the future." Good on you, because you're
Yeah.
part of the reason why he feels comfortable coming back.
Mhm. 1000%. You didn't see the bad things like hating on him or anything like that. I think that is really a big thing. And I haven't spoken on the Under Armour thing much yet either. I really enjoy Under Armour. I mean, I'm wearing a Utah Under Armour thing right now, literally. I think they do a great job with Utah. I think it totally fits your brand to their point. They're not the flashiest, but they get the job done and they do an outstanding job. And I actually do think we've looked pretty flashy in the past too. So I think it works.
They're getting there with Utah's
Mhm.
uniforms, right? It's step by step, and I think Utah does get new uniforms this season. So I think you're going to see a good refresh for what Utah wants to keep as their brand moving forward. I think Under Armour is listening to what Utah really, really wants in terms of how their brand is identified and everything they want associated with it. And so they're going to really come together and produce something that is very clean, very aesthetically pleasing, and very much on par with both what the equipment staff and what the fan base likes, which I think is that homecoming uniform look, the Utah stripe with the interlocking U's,
Mhm.
just very basic, simple stuff that's interchangeable. So I think that's all going to come together. I don't think you get that with Nike. I think there's a lot of people that don't remember that we were getting the Miami fill-in uniforms in just red and black in 2006, 2007, 2008,
Yeah.
2009, the Eric Weddle years. And I'm going to stop talking about this now because, being an equipment guy, I don't look so much at the brand. I look at the product, and Under Armour does a really, really good job both with their uniforms and some of the other stuff that they do. But more than anything, I think it's the Utes equipment staff that does a phenomenal job
Oh,
of,
absolutely.
of creating a brand, creating an iconic look from a program that really doesn't historically have something that stands out,
Mhm.
and I think as long as I'm tying all this together, that is what Kyle Whittingham has done. Is he's created a brand, he's created an iconic program out of nothing, in essence.
Mhm.
This was never a defensive stalwart for the decades that you go look back
No.
at Utah history. You like Lee Gross Cup was one of the best quarterbacks in the country came from Utah, invented it. Well, he didn't invent it. Jack Curtis did, but Utah shovel pass. And I'm getting real out of my lane here, but for a program that's been successful, but really hasn't had a brand or identity,
Right.
both Kyle, the staff, everybody else has done a really tremendous job of trying to build one on the spot. And I think for people who have never done that before, it's really, really hard to do.
Absolutely. I think you're 1000% correct. And there will be, hey, there's a long off season until we get to August. So we'll definitely have you back on to talk some
You don't
uniforms
have to
and
agree with
tricky
me
stuff.
just because we're homies, man. You can tell me to go kick rocks. It's okay. I'll keep coming on Locked On Utes.
I do like Under Armour though. So no, I'm,
I
I'm
do too.
definitely with you too.
I do
So it's
too.
going to be fun to see how it all shakes out for the Utes. You know what else is a lot of fun? Heading over to FanDuel Sportsbook. Guys, we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number one sports book in America. That's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to the point spread, who will score a touchdown. It's all available at FanDuel. Super easy to install and set up. It's a safe, secure app that's super easy. And best of all, you can get paid by winning instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/locked on to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. Now that the matchup is set between the Chiefs and the Eagles. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment matter with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner or sportsbook partner of the NFL. Brian, the Utes got some very welcome dues. And, it's not always that Coach Witt and the coaches, like they ignore the outside noise, right? But it was getting really loud about adding a transfer through the portal for a wide receiver position. And of course, Utah added Alvis Whitted. It's like, all right, when are we going to see this addition play dividends? It was right away. Emery Simmons comes in through the portal, former Indiana receiver, a veteran guy who started out at North Carolina in 2019, didn't play a lot there, didn't do a ton for in 2020 or 2021 either, although he did have a spectacular touchdown grab. I forget if that was in the 21 or 20 season, but he had an unbelievable touchdown. Transfers to Indiana, works out great for him. 37 catches, 408 yards, and a touchdown to just another veteran guy who's played in some big games against some top programs, that played off against Michigan last year, played against Ohio State, that I think is going to come in and be a leader in the locker room, can help establish what Coach Whitted wants to do in his first year with this wide receiver room. And I think this is a great addition for this Utah football team in getting Emery Simmons.
I think it's a very Utah edition in the sense that this is a guy who has not gone out and excelled somewhere and put up massive numbers and become like the highlighted recruit. I think it's a guy that they know about because they've done the work behind the scenes and they know what happened in Indiana and everything like that. That's where Utah excels.
Yep.
It's not about finding the diamonds that are in front of everybody. It's about finding the diamonds in the rough that become absolute gems. And I think, when Utah was looking for a wide receiver coach, I think a big part of what they wanted was someone with experience. And Utah is a tough place because you can get a lot of young, talented coaches who recruit really well and shoot for the stars that just want to use it as a springboard. And I'm not saying that's the case with Kyle McDonald or uh, wow, why
Coach
am I?
Bumpus.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Coach Bumpus, because I think it's hard for any coach to turn down USC, and it's really really hard for any coach to turn down their alma mater.
exactly.
But I think what it is it's indicative of what coaches get when they come to Utah, right? They
Mhm.
get trained in the way to do things. They come learn under the Kyle Whittingham tree and all that kind of stuff. To answer your question, I think you know is he going to be a game breaking wide receiver the way that Darren Carrington was? Most likely not.
Yeah,
But I think you're adding a piece that, Coach Whitted will feel comfortable coming in and coaching. I have to believe, and I don't have any information on this, but I have to believe that Coach Whitted knew a little bit about Simmons before coming to Utah. And this was such a bizarre coaching search in the sense that like there was zero conversation about what was going on, right?
yeah.
You and I had no idea. And I,
Just saw the
I'm not.
fans clamoring for Steve Smith.
Yeah, well, and listen, I love that idea for the fans, but I know Kyle Whittingham would say the same thing. Like whatever Steve Smith does, he's going to be successful at. There's a reason that Steve Smith is very very successful at being on TV because that's what he
Agreed.
wants to do.
Yes.
And I think it's easy for us to say, oh, it would be so great to have this former player be a coach. It's a lot of work. Like Kyle
Lots.
Whittingham is not an easy boss in terms of what he expects from you. Does he take care of his people? 100%. And that's why you see so many, that's why you saw Coach Bumpus come back. It's why you see Luther Ellis come work for Kyle. but working at Utah is not an easy task.
Mhm.
And if you have, I'm not saying that doing media is any easier, but if you have other things in your life that you want to do, there are you can still
Yes.
pursue those with a media career, right? Um,
It's more downtime for sure.
it
I don't
is.
think
Well,
anyone in the
like
media
you
would
and I
argue
know
that.
this, man. Like
Yeah.
Fridays, like it's very much like Friday morning. You and I wake up, have a nice breakfast, have lunch. Maybe put together a little like secondary board because we're
Yep.
bored before the game starts, and then we go call games. Like that's the life when you're in media, right? And I
Mhm.
know we've done
Exactly.
prep all throughout the week, but it's not so much as the 9 to 5 regimented things that
Oh, yeah.
that people are used to, right? Um, and when you're on the recruiting board and especially with the way college football is now, you're on the clock 24/7, 365. So you really have to be dedicated. I think that's why Utah went after Coach Whitted. He's an experienced guy. He brings some experience to the table. He can take some of the load off of Andy Ludwig. He can help with some of the game planning in terms of the passing game. I think we never talk about this, but Jim Harding is extremely hungry to learn more about that. This only helps Jim Harding, and for a guy who's been with Kyle as long as he has, and like I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit, but I've said for a long time that Jim Harding
Yeah.
was one of the best offensive line coaches in college, and
Mhm.
beep beep, he's showing it out. I think for a guy who wants to be an offensive coordinator, like this is the best place in the planet for him to become one. He
Yeah.
knows Kyle, he knows what Kyle wants, and he knows what Kyle expects, and for him to get another experienced guy to come in and teach him what he knows from the outside, I think it's a good thing.
I absolutely
And
agree. It's a
that's without talking about Simmons as a prospect, right?
Yeah.
That's the insane part of it.
Yeah, I think it is a veteran guy too. When you look at, yes, we get Devon Vele coming back, but when you're looking at guys on the outside, look, Makai Cope doesn't have a lot of as many snaps. Obviously, got some experience last year, but still didn't produce a ton. And because that there are other mouths to feeds, we know that with what Dalton and the tight ends can do. But once again, just another reliable guy who's played in some of those tough situations, placed off against some strong secondaries. That's what I think Simmons will provide. Obviously, Utah lost a guy in Solomon Enos who had a lot of that experience going on in terms of just how many snaps he played. Now, Enos wasn't a guy who produced a ton either, and it'll be interesting to see how much Simmons does produce. Does he go for a career high in yards next year? Is he have a similar output and has to be willing to block a lot? I mean, he's going to end up blocking a lot. We know that, but how much is his volume going to see? Is he going to be able to beat out a guy like Makai or excuse me, Money Parks? Like I still feel like Money Parks is going to end up being over him in terms of seeing more targets. Yes, they might play different receiver positions, but I still feel like Money will get more targets. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it all works out in terms of the fit. But I think when you talk about what Coach Whitted is done, it's nice to see his imprint already being put on this team. It's going to be very exciting to see how it shakes out for the Utes because spring ball isn't as far off as everyone might think. It's always funny how quickly the college football season comes back around, Brian.
Oh, dude, it's so quick.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question real quick.
Yes.
Who do you think is the biggest need that Utah needed to fill on the offensive side of the football with Cam Rising and Brand Keith coming back?
I think it was getting another receiver. I felt like it was nice to get a guy through the portal who just has look, he's not the biggest name, but I don't think there were a ton of just game-changing receivers in the portal, especially left at this point. This is later in the game too. The portal, of course, having now closed now, and guys who didn't have a home just kind of out there kind of looking, seeing what was going to end up being available for them. So I think for a guy in Simmons comes in here, and I think it's a good opportunity for him to build his brand up, and it's a good for Utes to get another veteran or grown up in the room.
And even if like I don't know how the NIL stuff works out, but say that Utah has a certain amount of NIL money slotted, Devon Vele coming back, Brant Keithy coming back, they're going to eat up a lot of that kind of stuff in terms of a salary.
Mhm.
You're replacing a lot of production from Solomon Enos in terms of just play by play, having been out on the field, bringing in Simmons, who has some experience, who's a little bit of an elder on the roster in terms of designation. I think that's a big thing for Utah because um, they can't just keep backfilling with freshmen, right?
Yep.
They can't just keep reloading. You've got to bring in some players with some experience, and Simmons has a high ceiling. If he
Very
doesn't
much so.
pan out, what does Utah lose? Nothing,
Exactly. Yes.
right?
If anything, he'll help the other guys in the room. I feel like the ones who are having success, he'll be like, they're trying to do this to you. You need to do this to be able to beat it. Even though when some of those guys haven't been able to produce themselves, a lot of those guys, it's the reason we see a lot of great coaches weren't as successful as players. Is sometimes they can see things, they just can't execute it themselves, but they can be there to help their teammates and show them things that they've seen and dealt with before. And I think that's what Emery's going to do, be an extension of what Coach Whitted wants to do in the room. So it's going to be a nice presence and a good plus for this Utah offense. It'll be fun to see how it shapes up. You know what else is going to be a lot of fun is the Senior Bowl. And you guys can check in with the Reese's Senior Bowl at the Locked On Network because Locked On is heading to the Senior Bowl. Get inside analysis from hosts that cover the NFL's next generation in college and find out which NFL draft boards these players will be climbing all in one location. Subscribe to Locked On NFL NFL Draft for nightly live shows from the Senior Bowl on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So 7 o'clock here. Make sure you guys look at those live shows on the Locked On NFL Draft feed. Also, want to talk to you guys about our friends at UCCU. UCCU is opening a new branch in Vineyard to celebrate. UCCU is giving away a 2023 Kawasaki Terry UTV. Vineyard is one of the fastest growing cities in the state. The new branch offers all the benefits of a UCCU branch, multiple drive-up lanes, 24-hour ATMs, and UCCU's brand new interactive teller machines, or ITMs for short, which provide all the benefits of meeting with a real UCCU professional, either in the branch or right from your vehicle. It's a virtual connection to a remote teller with a highly personalized audio and video connection. So celebrate the new Vineyard UCCU branch. Enter to win a 2023 Kawasaki Terry x4 UTV. Winners will be announced in April, just in time for summer fun. So make sure you stop by UCCU's new branch in Vineyard, conveniently located next to the Megaplex Theaters and Topgolf, or enter at uccu.com. You don't even have to be a member of UCCU to enter, so there is no excuse not to head over there, and there's no purchase necessary to cash in. UCCU, love where you bank. Bryan, before we close out this one, I think one of the important things that I wanted to touch on quick is, look, we're talking about this Utah football team, right? Back to back Pac-12 champs, and a lot of these guys are getting celebrated and getting their dues. But one thing, as I was watching all the NFL games that we're recording this on a Sunday, you guys will hear this on a Monday. As I'm sitting back and watching, I'm watching the Eagles go out there and do their things, and I'm thinking about the last time they won a Super Bowl. Who was out there? Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. Also, guys like Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson. Who are those guys? The important guys in the trenches, and how essential those guys are to championships. And I want to make sure, and I really hope these guys don't get, when we talk about Utah football and being back-to-back Pac-12 champions, yes, we're going to talk about Cam Rising, Dalton Kincaid, Devon Vele, guy Clark Phillips on defense. But other guys I want to be mentioned up there too, Keaton Bills, Braden Daniels doing an outstanding job on the left side. Guys like Nick Ford, who helped out last year, Bam Olaseni. Hey, Paul Miley too. He was still, even though we talked about ups and downs, he's still a guy who helped this Utah team achieve some high things. Satawa Laumea, even if the transition out to tackle wasn't perfect, he was still a first team all Pac-12 kind of guy. So offensive line and trenches success. And I should also mention the defensive line too, with guys like what Mika Tafua did. You look at this year, Jonah Ellis, Putu Tau last year, Van Fillinger, Junior Tafuna, all these guys so essential to the success that this Utah football team has had in the past few years. I just want to make sure those guys don't get forgotten, because we don't win those games without them.
It's we always tend to look at the money plays, right?
Yep.
The touchdowns, whoever caught the pass, whoever's throwing the pass, all that kind of stuff. And it's easy to negate the work that gets done in the trenches. Now, if you get a lot of sacks, all of a sudden you get recognition, right? And pressures don't get the same kind of attention that sacks do, especially in games, because I think most of us are not checking the pressure stats during the course of the game and looking for that kind of stuff. It's one of the reasons why you and I talk about the game the way that we do, right? We want to really identify the things that are less conspicuous in people's heads when they're watching the games, because we want people to watch actual football, not just what's been told to them over the years.
Mhm.
That being said, I think where you're kind of going in the direction that you're heading in terms of looking at some of these unheralded guys, it's not just the offensive line, it's not just the defensive
Yeah.
line, right? There are some other guys out there that I think, Sione Vaki's a guy who started to make his imprint on things, right? Munir McClain is a guy that I think could really emerge as a playmaker and a game breaking kind of
Mhm.
guy on the offensive side of the football. We just don't see the guys up front get those kinds of game balls. Braden Daniels is going to go under the radar and probably have a 15-year NFL career, and
Mhm.
everybody's going to be like, "Where did he come from again?"
Yes.
Utah.
Mhm.
But Junior Tafuna, some of these names from position groups that always get identified by the narratives are always going to be, at the tip of everybody's tongue, right? But I think this year was unique because we saw a lot of development from that defensive front, not just in terms of guys who had been there before, but in terms of new guys stepping into positions. Connor O'Toole is a big one, and you have to think that he takes another big step
Yep.
forward. Jonah Ellis took a big step forward. Van Fillinger, I think, played reliably well up until his injury, and while he wasn't posting the stats, he was consistent, and they could depend on his play. And then you saw what Mickey Sungataranga did.
Mhm.
Mickey is one of those guys that I always try to highlight because he does so much of the dirty work,
Yes.
and his versatility to be able to slide. And this is the hard thing. We look at defensive linemen as all just like one big giant herd
Yeah.
of elephants, right?
Mhm.
You and I know that, like, it's a big difference to play center and play guard and play tackle, right?
Very much so.
There's a lot of technique that changes, positioning,
Mhm.
how you play, all that kind of stuff. What techniques you're using. Same on the defensive front. And for Mickey to be able to slide from end to a 5 tech where he's almost a 3 and an odd front guy to being even sometimes at a 3 technique when he's rushing the quarterback. And I will never forget the play that he made where he basically collapses the entire pocket against USC
Yes,
to allow, I believe it was Connor O'Toole to get a sack.
exactly.
Um, and so those are the guys that like we never, I know we try to identify them as much as possible. I think it's real credit to you seeing that like, this Philadelphia Eagles team is a great example, right? Like this is a defensive team and it is an offensive line team, and
Mhm.
Jalen Hurts just is smart enough to fill in the gaps where he needs to.
Yep.
Which is not to take anything away from Jalen because that's
Nope.
really hard to do in the NFL. But
Very hard.
um, I guess as we wrap this thing up, do you have, as you're thinking about this, who are some of the guys that you look at that you feel like are the most unheralded that played for this Utah football team this year?
I think Braden comes to mind right away just because, look, left tackle, I thought he was absolutely dominant and outstanding.
Never
Even in
heard
the
much
season.
from him, right?
Never. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
You
like, I mean, it's sad to say it, but that's one of the like the easiest like identifiers in
yeah.
terms of like, is their left tackle giving up a lot of pressure? No, that's
Yeah.
a good thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and you mentioned guys like Suga Turanga, what he was doing as at the defensive tackle position, right? Getting in, especially in the Pac-12 championship game when he slid in down there and was able to produce and do some of those things for this Utah team. We've been big fans of Jonah Ellis on this podcast for a while now for what he's able to do. He's another guy where I feel like we've done a good job giving these guys kind of their light, their shine. Keaton Bills, you've been on him for a long time, Brian too. So I really feel like it's the guys who don't make the plays because you can look at a box score and you see tackles, you even see passes deflected, a guy like Zemiah Vaughn and that's too. But it's harder to see pressures like that. And I think the reason pressures are so hard to see a lot of time is because everyone watches the ball, right? So when a guy gets a sack, that quarterback is holding the ball. So everyone's watching that. You look and see who made the play. But when a quarterback throws it away on a pressure, you watch the ball sail out of bounds. Your eyes don't stay on the player who ended up breaking up. And yes, sometimes the broadcast will note the job they did, but they don't get the credit they deserve.
No, they don't. And I think, Keaton Mills is such a great example of just what it means to be a developmental guy, right? He is limited in terms of like, he is built to be a road grader.
Mhm.
And, I didn't send that meme out into the universe by accident where I had him on top of the cat and said,
Yeah.
he deserves the NIL deal. That dude moves earth and he
Yeah.
does it in impressive fashion. And, for anybody who wants evidence of it, go back and see whatever Scotty Stevens has done for Ute Zone in terms of his photography, because Scotty has an eye for the
Yeah.
offensive line,
Very much
and
so.
it's probably not just because we're good friends. Scotty understands. He's done this for a long time. He knows where the bread is buttered, so to speak. And so those guys deserve recognition in terms of Keaton is fighting against a lot of things in terms of he's not the most mobile athlete, right? Like he
Mhm.
is built like I mean, dump truck really because he's got some dumps.
Yeah.
Um, but he does a great job with it, and he's continuing to improve, and he's really developed in everything that he can control in terms of watching fronts and moving with the defense and being intuitive in terms of where blitzes are coming from, and so he's a guy that returning next year, like as much as Utah has so much talent, just sheer pure ability up front now on the offensive line, his experience, his knowledge base, his leadership, his cool, calm demeanor, all that kind of stuff, his ability. I think if you go back and watch the Oregon film, Keaton is a big reason why Utah wasn't just getting blown up every single
Yeah.
play because he was willing to
Yep.
sacrifice and do the little things to help out here and there so that they could be
Make an
competent.
impact. Mhm.
And it wasn't the best showing by Utah. That's nobody's going to argue against that. But those are the kind of guys you want, the guys who are willing to do that kind of stuff, who are willing to put in the work, develop, and show that fight. And I think um, I think that's what's always exciting to me about spring ball is seeing who are those guys. I thought Falcon Kalmatule was a guy who was going to step into that
Mhm.
role at right tackle just based on everything I saw from him in spring ball and everything that I heard. And I think Jim Harding said it best in fall camp. He said he's done everything we've asked him to do. Utah just had a better setup when it was Keaton Bills and Moko,
Mhm.
Michael Mogofisi at the guards, and then Satawa at tackle. Now, listen, Satawa needs to be a guard. I think you know it. I know it. we're just hoping that the development is good enough to where Utah feels comfortable doing it this year, but we'll see. I think
Yep.
that's the fun part about this sport is you never. I mean, these games were classic examples, right? You never expect what's going to happen. Nobody could have expected Brock Purdy to get hurt, Josh Johnson
I
to come
know.
in, all that kind of
Nice
stuff.
coach.
Yeah. So it's just it's one of those things where that's why football is so great and why it's so much fun to watch it and everything like that. And I think that's what makes spring ball really exciting for me is you got a lot of dudes coming in who are going to be great in Spencer Fano, Caleb Blomer, even Roger Alderman, who is just
Yeah.
this forgotten dude, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'm excited to see the guys like Tyler Canuck, who have been in the program for a year now and have a little bit under their belts and have some experience, see what they put on, put out there in spring ball and how they develop. This program is very much about what can you do every single day to get better. And I think that's when we talk about how special this program is, it's not because of what they do on the field, it's because of what they do off of it, right? And
Mhm.
it is the guys who put in this work every single day to be special when there is nobody watching and there's no real push, like there is during a game week to be great. And I think that's the really unique part about Utah football and the program that Kyle Whittingham has built.
It absolutely is. It's a special program and it breeds special people. How about Britton Covey going to a Super Bowl in his first year in the
Crazy.
NFL? You love to see it, Brian.
Yeah, and Alex Whittingham, coach for Kansas City, son of
Yeah.
Kyle, going to another Super Bowl there with Andy Reid. That's the really cool part about being a Utah
Absolutely.
fan and following this program, man. The influence, the Whitfluence, if you will, it's everywhere.
It
Brian
absolutely.
Johnson, quarterback
Yes.
coach for the Eagles.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Soon to be potentially even a head coach in the not too distant future, by
boy,
the way, with some of the
talk
momentum in the
about
state.
stock rising, man.
Oh my
I want
gosh.
his
Yeah, absolutely.
portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give me
It'll be
all the
fun to
Brian
see.
Johnson shares right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Right now.
You know what else you guys can get the shares of is college basketball. Locked On College Basketball is available for you. You can tune in and hear experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton as they bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, you can hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate Brian as always for joining us. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll see you tomorrow.